Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the floor leader please rise? You know, when I heard this bill was coming to the floor last night, the first thing I thought of was a quote from Rahm Emanuel, "Don't let a crisis go wasted." You know, you mentioned about 25 years, and this bill has been around 25 years. Well, here's another historical fact. Maryland actually, the legislature bankrupted the state, I think it was 1850 and 1914, and this budget process has been in place since that time. So what, you know, was that 106 years? Why are we changing it today? A 106-year process. Why are we changing a 106-year process today?
Thank you for the question. I hope the majority leader doesn't mind if I provide a history lesson on his behalf.
Sure. Be interesting. Always interested in learning.
Sure. So the process that existed for 150 years before this evolved over time. And for a long time, the legislature would send to the governor a series of budget bills that were totally unorganized. The legislature would originate them. No one was totaling them out. Finally, in the early 1900s, they figured out, oh, we should consolidate our budget bills. We should have one budget bill. The legislature did that, but somehow, amazingly, I mean, you're going to think this is crazy when I tell you, they did not add up the amount of money that was in that bill, right? So they had one consolidated bill that would go up to the governor, but no one added up all the appropriations in it. And it turns out that some years, the amount of appropriations exceeded the amount of revenues, right? And so the Good Now Commission was formed to come up with a better system. Now, they made a number of changes. I think it's Section 52 of Article 3 of our state constitution is all about the executive budget process. This change that I'm describing is a very small aspect of what was recommended. And that Good Now Commission was part of a nationwide movement that was looking at budget processes throughout the United States. We are the only one that adopted this particular idea of not letting the legislature, if they decrease funds in one place, increase them elsewhere. So this is actually a relatively minor change that basically gives effect to something we've already been doing on fencing off funds. This will not bankrupt the state unless you think the governor is going to send us a budget with an overall allowance that would bankrupt the state. And I might also add, this does not touch the Board of Public Works mid-year reduction process, which continues to exist in law. And unfortunately, we may see that this year, that the Board of Public Works may need to come together during the interim to make some line item cuts. That power continues to exist under this provision.
So I want to thank you for answering that question. That was a good history lesson, but you only partially answered my question. Why today?
Well, as I said earlier, today's our last day, and it's important that we get that on the ballot this year, because I don't want it to be, and I don't think the author or the body wants it to be entrenched in who they think the governor is going to be. Because, look, let's be honest. Odds are, if you had to ask the folks in this chamber, if you took a poll, the governor's probably going to be from my party and not from yours, and you're going to suddenly love this power a lot more than I am. But I don't want to have that debate about gubernatorial politics, which is why we put it on the ballot this year, when that's not an issue, and we know this governor is term limited and cannot serve another term consecutively.
Let me ask you a quick question, though, about the current process. So right now, the budget originates with the governor's office, and that makes a lot of sense because the governor is elected by the entire state of people.
And that will continue.
Yep, and then the budget comes to, like, the House Appropriations Committee, and then you can make cuts and reallocate money, and that money stays fenced off. And the governor can elect not to spend that money if he chooses. Is that correct? Is that basically it?
That mostly summarizes the current system.
What's to stop a small group in this chamber that has a significant amount of political power making cuts to the governor's budget that's represented across the entire state? What's to stop them from making cuts to one area and reallocating the money back to, I don't know, say their own?
I don't know. I'm not sure what you're getting at. I mean, it requires a majority to act in this chamber, so the small group can't do what you're describing. If the majority of the body decides to adjust budget priorities,
well,
yeah, I think that should be within the prerogative of the
I don't know if that's actually accurate what you're saying there. There's 24 jurisdictions here, but predominantly the controlling party, the supermajority, resides in what, 6, 7 counties? So what's preventing them making cuts to rural area counties with this amendment and reallocating that money back to, I don't know, the more metropolitan areas, or the areas that, let's face it, the supermajority represents?
I would draw your attention to the capital budget. The capital budget does not exist under the constraint we've been describing here of us not being able to increase funds.
Okay, but we're not talking about the capital budget. We're talking about this amendment on this budget, which is operating. So I would like you to answer the question, Jack, directly, to tell you the truth. What would
Delegate,
prevent
thank
that?
you. Do you want me to answer it?
Yes.
Okay. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. I think the capital budget offers a good example of how we can act as a unified body to service the entire state. And, sometimes we need to fund a road in rural or Eastern Shore or Southern Maryland, and we need to do that. Sometimes we need to fund a transit system in Montgomery County, and we need to do that. We do these things as a body in the capital budget all the time. And so I think that's the example we have. And you can also look at 49 other states. 49 other states also have diverse populations. I know we call ourselves American in miniature, but we are not the only state that has rural, suburban, and urban parts of it. So you can see examples all over, including in this chamber with the capital budget we're going to hear later, of how we're able to be one Maryland and make sure that Southern Maryland's needs are met, suburban Maryland's needs are met, the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, Baltimore and their suburbs as well.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, on the amendment, this is a process that's been in place for over 100 years. They have it on the last day of session, announced on the floor last night that we were going to have this bill in rules at 10:41. We can argue about the process, we can argue about the merit of the bill, but this is the wrong time, the wrong day to be taking up something like this. I support the minority leader's amendment. I think it's a good one, some truth in advertising if we're going to push that bill. This is nothing about dealing anything with balanced budgets. This is about taking power away from the executive branch and moving it over to the legislature that has a horrible track record, may I add. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Somerset.